President Trump is threatening to shut down the federal government if he doesn't get his way on immigration reform. The president tweeting out that he wants money for the border wall with Mexico and also demanding that Democrats put up the votes for the rest of his immigration reforms. But with just under 100 days before the midterm elections, there's fear, at least among many Republicans, that all this could end up helping the Democrats.
Is the funding of the border wall going to wait until after the midterm elections?
Probably, and that's something we do have a disagreement on.
So you're not worried about a government shutdown before the midterms?
No, that's not going to happen.
I certainly don't like playing shutdown politics.
And how damaging would that be for Republicans ahead of the November races?
I don't think it'd be helpful, so let's try and avoid it.
The president is also facing a backlash from one of the Republican Party's biggest supporters, the Koch brothers, and their network, who've spent tens of millions of dollars backing the Republican Party in elections, are now saying President Trump's divisiveness is causing long-term damage. There has even been some serious talk of supporting at least some Democratic candidates if their interests align. Joining us now is James Davis. He's a Koch Network spokesman. James, thanks so much for joining us.
No, thank you.
So why is your network raising the alarm right now about the president?
Well, we've always had the same vision. How do we remove barriers that are holding people back from achieving their potential? And so our engagement in the public policy and political process is just a small part of what this network does overall, but it gets obviously a lot of attention. And so as we look at the successes we've had in working with partisan coalitions throughout time, we've seen some great success through tax reform. We've seen justices. We've seen VA reform, and that could go on and on. But we've also seen tremendous setback, and those setbacks are significant. A $1.3 trillion spending bill. Then we see families being separated at the border. These are just injustices that we have to continue to fight against. And so we want to make it clear that building policy coalitions as we move forward, we think is the best way to cut through the divisiveness that we're seeing across the country and to actually mobilize on some change and make progress on some of these issues. We talked about one of those areas this week. You had right to try legislation, which is for terminally ill patients, the ability to use experimental drugs. Congress completely agreed on this. The House and the Senate had legislation on it. The president mentioned it in the State of the Union address. The American people overwhelmingly support it, and yet Congress was going nowhere. So we said we have to step up our efforts, and we launched a campaign ad highlighting it. We mobilized grassroots, pushing forward on it. And lo and behold, we saw tremendous bipartisan support both in the House and the Senate. And then the president signed it into legislation. Yep. That's the kind of leadership that we need to bring forward in order to just tackle these challenges.
Let me just point out a couple other issues, important issues. As you know, your network, the Koch Network, has been trying to persuade the president to shift his views on trade and tariffs, so far without a whole lot of success. He's got trade battles going on with China, with Europe, Canada, Mexico. Is that a threat to the overall U.S. economy?
Absolutely. The economy is going really strong right now. The numbers just came out, 4.1%. I mean, that is tremendous, stronger than in years. And that's a testament to the work that's been done on tax reform and removing some of the regulatory barriers. And the tariffs and this trade war threatens to undermine that progress significantly. And this is a tax on the American people, after all. And, you know, even the policy that's put forward, it's hurting the very people that it was meant to help. Farmers now need a bailout. There's a $12 billion bailout that's being put forward. And it's really not a bailout for farmers as much as it's a bailout for bad policy. And at the end of the day, we were talking about putting these tariffs in place to hurt China for the bad actions that they've taken on trade. And who holds our debt? China. So you can't make this stuff up, Wolf.
The president's former chief political strategist, Steve Bannon, he replied yesterday telling Politico that officials at the Koch Network, and I'm quoting him now, need to shut up and get with the program. How do you respond to Steve Bannon?
We're not going to get into the divisive nature and continuing in that course. We're focused on uniting people to tackle challenges and help people succeed. And so that's where our focus is going to be. So I'll leave that to Steve Bannon.
Let me one final question on the budget deficit. It's exploding right now, and I'll put some numbers up on the screen. In 2016, the budget deficit for that year, $587 billion. First year of the Trump administration went up to $666 billion. The Congressional Budget Office now suggesting it could be $1 trillion next year, less revenue coming in because there have been tax cuts, a lot more spending for military and other issues as well. How does the Koch Network feel about $1 trillion budget deficit coming up?
Well, we think that's awful. And the problem here is not the tax cut that Americans rightly deserved. That has stimulated the economy and created new growth. The problem is the $1.3 trillion package that Republicans signed into place. That is a lack of leadership.
Any Democrats yet joining your network for support? Have you got any names you'd like to mention?
Well, we have an open invitation. And you know what? Regardless of whether we agree on every issue or not, right, there are certainly going to be issues where we can find common interest, and we're going to aggressively pursue those areas of common interest so we can unite to build strong bipartisan coalitions and drive these policy changes so that we can make some progress. The problem is it's so divisive and factionalized at this point that even when you do find opportunities where there's agreement, it's hard to work with one another because those relationships have been destroyed. What we see is that we need to work toward a society of mutual benefit where people succeed by helping other people succeed, creating win-win situations for the American people.
All right, we'll see where this leads. James Davis, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.